Breathlessly, I emerged from the elevator of Pauline Good's 6-story office building in Basildon. I had taken the A12 as far as Romford, then changed onto the A127, even though Southend Arterial Road is a bit of a ball ache around Dunton Waylets. Crap, this office is spacious by London standards. It was made of brick and not much else.
Miss Salt, I'm Pauline Good. Please follow me into my bit of the office.
An attractive manager said that last thing to me. He was young, with blonde eyes, and brown hair slicked back as far as last week. He wore a fluorescent blue sleeveless vest, and yellow tracksuit bottoms that seductively hung off of his hips around his ankles. I could barely look at him. Hello, I am Papers. I am from Papers. Here for you, to interview. To you?
Very good. Please sit down. I'll answer questions.
Good. He extended his long-fingered butt into the chair that was his, and looked receptive. God, he was handsome. He looked like Kit Harington, but less slappable. He had 47 polo mints in a bowl in front of him. I wasn't offered one. Mr. Good, you're the youngest billionaire this side of Chelmsford. What's the secret to your rocket-like success?
That's very interesting. I think a positive attitude is very important, and of course knowing the right people. I have a good feel for people and what they'll be good at and for, which is great when...
Oh, Christ, he's arrogant. What an absolute wanker.
I guess it's all about having a coherent mission statement. You can put in all the work you want, but if you're not at all working towards achievable goals, then it's just... Look, what's your next question?
Are you a pervert?
No!
Sorry, my mate wrote these questions, and I have no autonomy.
Really?
The ghost of a smile drifted over his lips. I was sick of his double entendres and double talk. I just wanted to get back onto the A12 before Brentwood let out. There is something about him, though. His devil-may-care approach to eyebrows. His unkempt hair bristling at the slightest sound in the office. The way his eyes danced about his face and hung off at them.
Look, I'm a busy man. Did you have any more questions?
What do you do in your spare time?
Well, I like to get pretty physical on the weekends, if you know what I mean. You're very inexperienced. I like that.
I blinked rapidly at him.
Stop that.
You've been awfully lucky, don't you think?
I believe we make our own luck. The harder I work, the luckier I seem to get. Know what I mean?
Ghost of Anne Frank danced across his face. So you like power then? Is that what you perv on?
I'm not a perv. I employ 40,000 people at Goose Chicken Nuggets. If I decided to get out of the game, then 20,000 people would struggle to pay their mortgages.
Didn't you just say 40,000? I asked, disgusted.
I own this company. I'll pay as many mortgages as I like.
What a prick.
I think we should probably end this.
Nice balls, I bet, though.
I think we should probably end this interview.
Are you late for some perving?
I'm not a perv. Get out of my office. What are you doing after this? Get out. I love you.
As I left the perv's office, I couldn't help but wonder what Pauline Gray really thought of me. He seemed somehow upset by my questions, but he did have his cock out all the way through that interview. Something tells me that every conceivable aspect of my life would soon revolve around Pauline Good. Pack of polos, please.
I'll get those. 1 billion packs of polos.
Between a Mickiewicz and a Sinskiewicz. Not even close. Doesn't mean we won't try, though. I'm Paul Salt. Pronounce that.
I'm 50 Shades of effed up too, you know. Where's my helicopter?
Come on, world, reward me for this. And today, in the third and final part of our series on other artistic mediums, we shall be looking at literature. Invented in 1936 by Charlie Dickens as a method of making it harder to get a degree, literature was all the rage in that brief bit in between when everyone was too poor to be literate and when everyone was too lazy to be literate. Great days.
Halcyon, mate.
This is to be a podcast of two halves. First, an inferno in which the Pauls fight their way through one of the most controversial bestsellers ever sort of written, before swiftly ascending to the lofty paradise of our favourite novels of all time. And along the way, we shall discuss the merits of literature as an art form, because I imagine that's still up for grabs.
Jury's really out on this one.
Is it just a fad? So Paul, you book burner.
Jeez.
What is actually the point of reading?
Aside from warding off hateful horny males on the London Underground.
Gotta do something.
By pretending you're busy. with Dan Brown's Inferno.
Excuse me, like, oh, sorry, didn't realise you were reading.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't realise you're reading. Accept my apologies. I'll never interrupt somebody who's reading or got their headphones on. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My mother would be ashamed. I'm so sorry.
Oh, you are my mother. Oh, God, you must be ashamed.
It's because you were reading a book. I thought you were so damn fine, mother.
Oh, I love
As one fine literal mother.
that pensive academic look.
Books. They're great.
Think about books.
To be reductive, there's a transportive, escapist element to reading in there.
Sure is.
Even the most turgid literary fiction, like
You're looking over to your bookshelf.
Yeah, the Spanish vocabulary.
What a journey
from Barons. We're a tribe of storytellers, human beings, I think. And
sure we are.
There's just a follow-on of that storytelling tradition.
But haven't we moved on, Paul? We've got Netflix now. What do we need books for? Look at them, big and heavy, and made of all floppy pages. Look at them.
What a joke! What is
like
this?
Flappy cocks.
The Bible, but for gay nerds. I've always thought you're either going to read or you're not. I'm not sure how much of a distraction Netflix is from people who really do enjoy reading. I'm sure there are times when you'd go, oh, maybe I'll just binge watch Jessica Jones series 2, but you'll always go back to reading. The people who watch Netflix and don't read, I think, are the people who back in the day would have done anything else in the world other than read.
So you don't think readership levels have really changed in terms of the percentage of the population who read?
Well,
for one thing, literacy has become extraordinary over the last 100 years. It's it's usually up at something like 97% or something like that, isn't it?
I don't have numbers, and I'm assuming that if there are going to be numbers in this episode, it's going to come from you. But I would say that obviously there's been an increase in readership levels with an increase in literacy. Obviously, I don't know what the percentage of the population who can read do actually read and how that's changed, but there are always going to be people who love to read, always going to be people who don't love to read and who would rather do anything else. There may be a grey area, because you can't deny that phones and TV and such are more distracting.
They can be. I'm interested in the sort of unique strengths of literature versus the other things, because I think it's almost a cliche, whenever a kid is doing anything, playing a video game, watching TV, out having fresh air and exercise, the stereotypical response from mum is, you could be reading a book now. Why aren't you kids reading? Now, why is that? Why is it generally perceived as the highest form?
Say you're raising a child, he would pick up on playing a video game easier than he would learning to read, I imagine.
So the difficulty is an aspect.
Yeah, maybe there's the academic side of literacy.
It's the most well-established of most current forms, with the oldest novel being Tale of Genji, I think, usually, by common consensus.
When was that?
11th century.
11th century?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
That's
Take that, Cervantes.
That's 1,000 years of perfecting this form and studying this form and working on it. So it does have that sort of backing of history behind it in a way that Super Mario just doesn't, Not yet. Give it another 900 years. Because it's already been 100. Right?
They've released enough content to tell one story so far. So
the story of a plumber. But it's the story of a plumber retrieving a princess from a big dragon. Is it not in some way ageless?
The universality of a plumber retrieving a princess from a dragon.
Dennis Hopper related to it. Bob Hoskins related to it. That's everyone.
You're either a Hopper or a Hoskins. There's no middle ground.
The horrifying world we live in.
I guess cinema, video games are seen as more
passive.
Passive in one way, because video games have established incredibly interactive.
Yes. But not in terms of the imagination. There's a sort of mysticism around the idea of you summoning a world through your own ability to imagine what a tree might look like, because he used the word tree.
Yes, exactly. I guess everything in cinema and video games are given to you, presented to you.
Right.
Which is the issue with a lot of book adaptations, for example. Unless it's a book I'm just thoroughly addicted to.
Sure.
It's much easier just to turn on the PS4 or...
It is.
Stick on Netflix.
And it's a problem for me because it means that my reading speed has suffered, especially since I came up with new things to do on my commute. My phone wasn't very useful. It couldn't get YouTube on it. I couldn't watch videos on it. And I couldn't stream music to it. So I was only limited to the music on my on my iPod. So I did a lot of reading. That space has really been taken away now by lots of other things. And I'm trying to reclaim it because that, 2 hours a day of solid just sitting around And yet it's often when I'm at my most bleary-eyed first thing in the morning and when I'm at my most tired on the way home. So it's not ideal absorption points. And consequently, I think the image for this week is going to be my reading list pile because it's fucking monstrous. It's almost literally a wall in my house, a knee-high wall of three columns full of some of the greatest works of literature ever.
Are you going to read them, though?
I am. I'm fucking going to do it. I wish I could read a book a month. It's tragic to me that that's aspirational, but it really is.
I don't commute at the moment. Well, I cycle to work, so I don't know if you've ever tried to read a book and ride a bicycle at the same time, but it's too easy almost.
Far too horny.
I don't treat myself to that. But I do work in a bookshop, so there's plenty of reading. You're sort of inspired to read by just the sheer amount because you...
Look, if the customers come in and see you reading, they'll know it's a good thing.
No, you're not allowed to read at work. What, are you mental?
Oh.
No, you have to be on call, on hand at all times, sir. So,
excuse me. Yes, sir.
Is it this book?
How about this one? How about this one? How about this one?
Being around people who read, being around so many books, it gets you.
Get a lot of those
it reconfigured my mind again to think, I should be reading more and getting through a book a week. Whether that's actually happening or not is another matter.
Yeah.
But when I do commute, or when I have a train, or if I'm waiting for somebody, or I'm out and I'm waiting for a film to begin, I have my book, and that's still the time passer.
I think the unique strengths of the novel and the written form is ambiguity. It's very good at that. You can describe a character coming in and doing something without identifying who it is and leaving that to be a mystery, whereas in a television show you'd either have to shoot it, or film, you'd have to shoot it from a very awkward angle that would probably still give them away based on gait, size.
Yeah.
You can leave details out, which is wonderful. You can select which details to cover. I find that novels are uniquely capable of portraying great passages of time.
Yes.
And I think this is something that always struggles when you adapt a novel like something by E.M. Forster to the big screen, as much as I absolutely fucking adore Merchant Ivory films. It just never feels like decades have passed when you're in a film. It's very difficult to do, whereas in a novel, even just through a few paragraphs of description, we grew further and further apart over that summer. And as the trees began to shed. You can just stretch time. Yeah. You can really
that winter the chestnut stalls opened up on the Boulevard Voltaire, and my dog died. And
I love that dog. It was a good dog.
I think this is a discussion that we've tried to have a few times, and we ended up cutting it from pretty much every episode. Is that when you're making an adaptation of a book, you have to make your own movie. You can't. Whenever you try to do a literal adaptation of the book, it suffers because it's not a book anymore. You need to put your own spin on it. You need to make it your own thing.
Yeah, which is even true of screenplays. Screenplays aren't movies either. Screenplays are screenplays. It needs to be adapted even from that. So, it's a very singular process creating a film. But we're back on films.
Yeah, God, so easy. So distracting.
Well, whilst we're there, it's all very well, Paul, talking about literature in such lofty terms. But what about bad books, eh? What about them? You and I have made a podcast out of watching bad movies and awkwardly defending our rationale for doing so. So what about the books that are shite? Surely there's just as much reason to do that, right?
Well...
Do you think we should maybe do something really contrived to help prove that?
I think so. I think put our money where our mouth is.
Well, I've got a copy of 50 Shades of Grey here, so perhaps we could just quietly read it.
Okay, can you just hold it up to the screen and I'll follow you along?
Okay, just... Ooh. The sound of a zip going down.
Lob.
Fish for sale. Fish. Buy your fish.
Ding ding, ding ding. Oh, it's the Melbourne trams from the 1920s. Ding ding, ding ding.
Land ahoy!
It was actually quite relaxing doing that. It's been one thing that I think we should address is the time that it took to read. rather than watching a 2-hour movie.
Yeah, there's something about, especially a bad book, because when a bad movie is on the screen, it just carries on. And you can watch it, you can fucking think about the last time you kissed someone you genuinely loved, you can do anything you like. Yeah. When you're reading a bad book and you disengage, the book fucking waits for you to come back.
It's right there. And this one was 500 pages or something.
It was 430 something. It was awful.
It's not just the fact that it doesn't carry on when you're not paying attention. The amount of time that it took in the last week where we had to force ourselves to read this. We had other stuff to do. We were reading this whilst we were doing last week's podcast. And we were reading it whilst we were doing this one and watching a Halloween Nightmare on Elm Street movie. And then we had work, and then I was reading another book, so I didn't go insane. And then I was trying to write.
Jesus
my God!
Christ.
So I'm glad that this is the only time we're doing it.
Me too. And now that it's finished, the ocean of time that opens up in front of me, where I've previously been reading 50 Shades of Grey, it just lies before me, and I felt such a sense of relief. So. This is E.L. James, 50 Shades of Grey, E.L. James, 2011 kind of, novel kind of, that was originally a fan fiction serial featuring human versions of Bella and Edward from Twilight, or at least as human as E.L. James is capable of invoking. Mm-hmm. It was eventually adapted into an e-book and then a paperback, which had negative critical reception, accusations of problematic sexual politics, and is the fastest selling paperback in the UK of all time. It's sold 125 million copies, all 125 million of which we managed to avoid until last week. Mm-hmm. So, Paul, you control geek.
Crap.
What's something about 50 Shades of Grey, the book, that made you want to sign a lengthy lovemaking contract?
Every time Anna says wow, I said it to myself in an Owen Wilson voice.
Okay.
It kept me going in the dark nights.
Anastasia...
My winter fire.
You're my winter fire. Anastasia Steele
yeah.
is a highly neurotic, slightly insane, deeply naive student. Yes. Christian Bale is a... Christian Slater. What's his fucking name? Christian Grey. It's in the title.
Yeah.
50...
Christian Shades.
Yeah. Christian 50 is a fucking billionaire... tycoon of unknown fucking industry.
Proportions, yeah.
Proportions and industry.
She has been asked by her flatmate to interview Christian Grey of Grey Enterprise Holdings Inc., Pty Limited. and she goes, geez, holy crap, okay, let's go and do this. She almost dies 15 times on the way there. And when she gets there, she has a fairly rubbish interview with Christian Grey. Christian Grey takes a real liking to Anna.
He cancels his next appointment, Paul.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah,
to answer the hard-hitting questions. He's intrigued by Miss Steele.
He is, and that leads him to... because she's got
fit.
Messy hair. Yeah, she's fit. She's got... Good.
Yeah.
She's got really nice legs. She's unsure, get used to that, of whether or not these attentions are wanted.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there is now a photo shoot to happen to go along with the interview, which is to be done by Jose, her sort of friend.
Who also loves her unreservedly. It's all very good. And it's all very subtle. Yeah.
The point is, Anastasia is fucking great, and Christian's fucking great, but they're only attracted to each other because this was written by a teenager, kind of. After a lengthy negotiation about how they're going to go for coffee when there's all these people to be taken home, they go for coffee. Christian saves Anastasia's life when she's about to step in front of a cyclist.
Yeah.
A lethal cyclist. They're in London.
Transpires that Christian Grey has dark proclivities.
Yes, he enjoys BD... S and M.
Anna doesn't really know anything about all of this.
Or anything much about sex, because she is in fact a virgin, much to his incredible annoyance.
And lustiness.
Well, yeah.
It's an inconvenience and a massive advantage, he says.
He doesn't do vanilla sex, he only fucks, he never makes love. She says, I'm a virgin, and it's like, oh, well, let's go make love to you then.
Yeah.
And they go and have basic vanilla sex. Although the way it's written, it does sound like he slams his cock into her 3 times and then comes.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. It's a neat opening gambit when you're taking on a virgin to just slide your entire cock in there in one deft go. Don't build up, no. Give her a half and then work your way up. Nope. There it all is.
For you, love. Anyway, that's what sex is. Enjoy that forever. So
I love the idea, that the subtext of this is that he's really bad at sex, but she has no idea because she's a virgin.
Just stay with me, you can never know.
Up my nose. Jingled them about seductively. He must be very good.
Good and normal, says Christian.
Oh, not all men can do this, he said. It's push and pull, basically. There's he takes her in a helicopter.
Well, he has to sign a non-disclosure agreement because he's very rich and famous, and he can't get out his dark wants. And
coincidentally, it completely isolates her from all of her friends, so that she can't share any of this with them. But oh well.
Well, they weren't that great anyway. He takes
Jose. He's trying to get her drunk and kiss her.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, he takes her in a helicopter and shows her some amazing things, buys her a Mac and puts his email, sets her up an email address so he can email her straight away.
It appears that the Mac is solely an email program. It just opens and it's email and there's nothing else on it. Can I play Doom on this? No. It's got 32 gigabytes of RAM, a genuinely good statistic by modern standards. Yeah, no, email. Look at the paperclip. Look how well animated it is.
Yeah, but this is just a realistic depiction of what people with Macs do with their own.
Can I play The Witcher 3? Incompatible.
I must write this haiku. He is basically readily available at any time. If she sends him an email that he doesn't like the tone of, he's there. If she sends him a text that he doesn't understand or like the tone of, he's there. He's literally there, standing in the doorway.
If she doesn't do absolutely anything whatsoever, he is there.
It's really fortunate because she also just needs him unreservedly now. And he draws up a contract, which is the dominant submissive contract.
Yeah.
He will be the dominant.
It's a standard one. He wants her to submit to him, to eat whatever he wants her to eat, whenever he wants her to eat, to be available every single weekend solely for his sexual needs.
Yeah.
To do whatever he says all the time, forever.
In perpetuity.
And that would be in perpetuity. The sexiest kind of tuity. Yeah, and she decides not to sign that. They do a bit of spanking, which I think she likes.
It turns out Christian Grey is readily giving her these concessions because he is falling for her and he's enjoying vanilla sex and sleeping, sharing a bed with her, which he's never done with anybody before.
Never had any helicopter.
Yeah.
All sorts.
Never eaten bacon from a great height. And they did this as well. And
never have squeezed a grapefruit between her butt. That was the first.
It's a period of discovery for Anna and a period of great realization for Christian. And they get closer and closer. They spend more and more time with each other.
She goes and visits her mum and he shows up. There's some sort of falling out, although I can't remember what it's about. And anyway, in the end, she hasn't signed the contract. She is suddenly worried that he is going to expect more of her. And she doesn't want more. She wants more of him. She wants vanilla. He wants all sorts of crazy shit on his ice cream. Yeah. And it ends with him showing her just how bad it could potentially get by giving her a proper good hiding.
Yeah.
At which point she flips a lid and finally stands up for herself and runs away saying, it's all over. Not having this anymore. And the elevator closes and she's gone. And she goes back to her flat. And that's the end of that. Yeah. Until the next book. Whoa. When apparently all of that is undone.
Yeah.
But that's not our concern ever. Yay!
as a one-off sad ending.
Now, the bit I wanted to ask you before we did that. If you were reading this just because, not because of a podcast, but because you got curious, you've heard of 50 Shades of Grey, everyone has. I'm pretty sure half the people who read this just wanted to see how bad it was or how kinky it was. You've done that. When would you have stopped reading?
30 pages in.
What happens 30 pages in? That's about the hardware store, isn't it?
Oh,
or maybe the photo shoot.
It's just the first 50 pages. It really doesn't matter.
The first part's really rough. Let's talk a little bit about why it's so poorly written. The most basic thing I can pick up on is recurring words. The very limited vocabulary of Miss
Steele.
Of Miss Steele,
James.
but also by implication of Miss James. Real name something else I don't have the patience to find out. It's Queen Snowdragon, I imagine. So the word crap appears 50, 60, 70, 82 times in this 356-page novel.
Yep.
What else? Jeez?
Jeez. Oh, jeez.
Ah, jeez, she thinks to herself regularly.
Yeah.
20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 81.
Cool. How about holy cow?
How about cow? 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s? 46.
Okay.
Not bad. My favourite, murmur. 199, which is perfect, because if it was 200, you wouldn't believe me. It's so great that it's 199.
Holy balls.
And what in your mind, and also there's an extra 50 mutters, what in your mind is a murmur? What is murmur something to me?
I didn't want to do this to me book anyway.
That's it, right? It's shitty. Yeah. That's how I interpret murmur. And yet it's often stuff like, developing feelings for you.
Yeah. This is so hot, baby. God.
Do you want to lift back to the car?
Yeah, take it all, baby. Take all of my stupid dick.
You feel great inside, he murmurs. It's just fucking hell.
Yeah.
Okay, next thing that's terrible about this is the inner monologue. There's an inner monologue throughout, but she also says everything out loud as well. So mainly and also the inner monologue is often just repeating the last thing that Christian said. I want you in my sex dungeon. Sex dungeon?
Yeah.
I read it too, Anna.
There's also the two characters that she has going of her inner goddess and her subconscious. Yes. And as a one-off, anthropomorphizing her inner...
And it's the id and the ego, the animalistic tendencies of the inner goddess and the sort of ego of the subconscious, the pride.
There has to have been a less annoying way of doing that. I think it's not that good a line or an idea anyway, so to keep going back to it and relying on it to show how Anna is dealing with the various things that are happening to her.
It's not, it's very blunt, and it just has the effect of making her seem extraordinarily naive.
Yeah.
That she feels the need to articulate things to herself that we would take for granted. And then there's terrible dialogue.
The book could have been cut in half easily, just by cutting redundant paragraphs. It also could have been streamlined. There's really not that much that goes on in the book. Yes, you've got to allow a bit of time for Anna and Christian to get closer to one another. But
yes, but there's so much repetitive stuff in there, and some of that, I suspect, comes from its bones, which is that it is a Twilight ripoff. It's, yes. So it's following Twilight beat for beat, and I wonder if the visit to see her mother is from Twilight, because that could have so easily been removed.
Yeah.
I have a little piece of bad writing, which is just a very simple phrase messed up. How come that does not surprise me? I sigh heavily. How come that does not surprise me?
Yeah.
Why does that not surprise me? I mean, it's interesting that this is an English woman writing in an American patois. So there's lots of... That's why we've got the Jesus and the oh craps. It's very country bumpkin. So I've just read that I read the sentence, I want to chase the dawn with you, which I read as, wake up, I want to chase you across the lawn.
Which, is in keeping.
Oh, here we go. Here's a bit of dialogue. She's a dear valued friend and a business partner. That's all. We have a past, a shared history, which is mentally beneficial to me, though it fucked up her marriage. But that side of our relationship is over.
Mm-hmm.
Anna Steele, I'm Jack Hyde, the commissioning editor here at SIP, and I'm very pleased to meet you. Well, it's just, as a thing no one would say.
It could have been written by Garth Marenghi, couldn't it? It's that level. The text is full of cliches. Someone's got the attention span of a goldfish. She's all fingers and thumbs. It's so
unimaginative,
trite. Everyone grins. One of my main issues with a lot of genre fiction, and Harry Potter was one of these as well, people grin all the time. Do you know what a grin is?
Yeah.
It doesn't work for 95% of the times when somebody grins, and people grin. Like Christian will grin and be like, here's my big fat cock, Anna.
He grins.
It's so...
Ta-da!
Everything is incongruous. Nothing works. His long finger.
Yeah.
She keeps mentioning his long finger. like he's the Hitcher from The Mighty Boosh.
Like he's Daddy Longlegs, the wrong man. It's just... It's horrible.
They'll be having a sensual chat, and suddenly he'll stroke his lip with his long finger. You know the body horror stuff you used to get in old Reeves and Mortimer?
Yeah. Yes. Oh, God.
It's like that. It's foul.
Yeah. And there's stuff like, she keeps referring to his grey eyes, which I know mean the colour grey, but his name is grey because of bad reasons. So it just sounds like he looked at me with his grey eyes, then touched me with his Christian hand.
This is Ron magic.
That's exactly it.
You could probably halve the length of this book by cutting out all the redundant adjectives. You don't need that many adjectives in your prose.
Yes.
I have a real big issue with recounting dreams in fiction as well. My issue with dreams in literature is that they don't, for me anyway, they've never worked like that. I very rarely dream something that's integral to something that I've experienced. That day.
Just dream about Vic Reeves coming at you.
Henry James, I think, said recall a dream and lose a reader, and it was a struggle. It was a good thing that we had to read it.
It is, and whenever the page would suddenly just be a long stream of very monosyllabic dialogue, or better yet, an email chain, I would just get very relieved because it means I can skim. I can just get there. Although there was actually some genuinely amusing moments hidden in the email subject lines, which I quite enjoyed.
They were good.
Can't skim too far. Maybe there's a hidden joke up there in the date.
Well, it's playing with the form as well, and moving. It was like David Lodge or something. It was great.
Let's move on a bit then. Let's talk about why people enjoy this. And I think there are some compelling reasons. Because first of all, it played into an established fan thing, the Twilight. This is how it became famous as Masters of the Universe. The plot is powerfully undynamic or interesting, but the mechanics of how the two of them work together is at least intriguing. How far is he going to go? How many concessions will he make? How far will she go? And are they actually going to make it work? I was interested in that, even if I wasn't interested in how the trip to see her mother was going to pan out.
There's a lot of needless stuff in there, but I will say that once I got past maybe page 100, I was at least curious to see where it would go.
Yeah.
There was something there, even if they're only attracted to each other because they're attractive.
Yeah, exactly. I could see how some people would find it genuinely tittillating. The sex scenes are actually fairly plain, it seems, and yet the one that probably got the biggest twitch out of me was when she gives him a blowy in the bath.
Oh yeah, nice.
That was interesting, and it was a moment. I think reason being, it was a moment where she took control, which I guess says something about me and my particular proclivities. But the moment when she was like, "Right, you're getting this done, sonny boy." That was the moment that got me interested in. I'm really into dinner ladies.
Well, we've been through this.
Do you want half a portion, love?
Oh, we're out of potato waffles.
Can I get a double portion, please?
No.
Say it again. No.
The lettuce in my egg salad is a little wilty.
My cock isn't, though.
I did like all the, I liked all the moments where Anna actually stood up for herself and took things into her own hands and got what she wanted. The sex scenes I found, if there was a titillating line, it would be one in a passage. There'd be one little thing where I'd go, oh, I'm in danger of being turned on here. And then...
I better get out of this playground.
Again.
Why do I read here?
No, the police warned me.
So quiet, though.
Yeah. Now. But
just the sounds of sobbing.
But then a few sentences, fortunately a few sentences down the line, you go, oh, no, it's fine. Because despite trying to depict fairly racy things, she would insist on very Victorian language.
Yeah.
Like referring to a vagina as her sex.
Yeah, what did she think the sex is? Because there was a moment where he's got the tip of the riding crop and he's brushing against her sex through her pubic hair to the entrance of her vagina. So wait, where does the sex start? Is it the belly button?
This is sex, my lad.
We're going to start at the sex, and then we're going to go through the pubes and arrive at the vagina. I mean, I checked the map that she provided at the beginning of the book, but it was no help.
I found Gondor. Over the misty mountains.
Far away. Regardless of the quality of it, I think there was something to be said of it as just a mainstream pornographic novel marketed towards women. And it's similar to our Twilight discussion. This might have opened the doors, the floodgates, so to speak, for other novels, although nothing really comes to mind, but then I'm not the market audience. But maybe it's legitimized in some way the idea of erotic literature marketed to women that isn't just, the large print granny stuff that, gets put on the back shelves at libraries.
The Mills and
this
Boon
idea that
a-thons.
I saw this actually described as Mills and Boon with butt plugs.
Okay,
because
fine.
One thing about it that we should say is it's terribly conventional. We are aiming eventually for them just being married with kids, which is pretty dull considering.
Yeah.
They don't even try and have a Carrie and Mr. Big style marriage their way.
Is that genuinely what happens?
Yes, I'm told.
Okay, well I refuse to remember what you just said. Gonna pretend it's not.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of good to it. It's good that people are reading. I know that, sure. I've worked in bookshops in the past that scoff when people come in and buy one of the 500 copies of 50 Shades that, we'd have on a table. But for one thing, they kept the lights on.
Yeah, sure.
Almost single-handedly.
I remember I had a situation. I was in a supermarket and someone came to pick up the new Dan Brown book and said, oh, this looks good, to a friend. It was two old ladies. And in my head, it was like, oh, don't buy the Dan Brown book. And her friend replied, no, I'm not going to read a book. And I was like, oh, please buy the Dan Brown book.
Yeah,
Way to move the goalpost for me, Great British public.
I used to be a snob with this, just like I
Yeah.
used to be with, there's definitely an element in film and music for me as well, but I'm not anymore.
it floats
If
your
somebody wants to read, even if somebody wants to buy Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, I won't spit in their face.
It's very big of you.
And kick them up the arse all the way to the
Will
bookshelf.
Self would say you've sold out.
But no, I think that it's a good thing that people are reading,
Sure.
and you never know. You read that, you might go on to something else, or you might just keep reading that thing. But reading's good. It's good. It is good for the brain.
It is.
And it's...
I did read though that sex toy related injuries increased as a result of the high sales of 50 Shades of Grey. Apparently, and I don't know this because I should say I'm not really into this kind of stuff, but apparently the book is teaching you really bad technique with all of this. Maybe that means you're not meant to put a couple of big metal balls up your vagina and go walking around the living room. I really couldn't say.
Oh. I did wonder actually, because again, this is not really for me, but I can imagine this opening up a whole world to people who domming or subbing.
Yeah.
Who literally never thought of it before.
Yeah. All right, Agnes. We'll try the.
I waited.
We'll try the medium butt plug.
Waited near 100 years for this. For awakening.
I think for some of it, I think one of the marketing things is this idea of it as a kind of dare for middle-aged women who are maybe a bit too old to be empowered by the idea of sort of female pornography. It's Edith says this is pretty steamy. How far in do you suppose we can get? And it's that kind of thing. And for millennials riddled with insecurities and a dependence on irony, it's how much of this rubbish prose can you handle? It becomes
I did see a lot of
Troll 2.
I don't really appreciate the self-satisfied reviews of just as I thought.
Yeah.
It was shit all along.
Yeah, there's no reason to come at this cynically. All right, well, aside from having recognized those are the reasons people quite like this, I would like to come at one aspect of this, and it's the one that most people would expect. It's the idea of Christian Grey himself as Mr. Romantic Lead, which from this book alone is not the position he seems to be filling. But we'll come on to that. So first of all, people object to the fact that the idea of being abused in childhood immediately means you're going to have some fucked up relationship with sex when you get older. It's very lazy, I'll say that. And it stigmatizes survivors of abuse, saying, oh, you probably want to kill a whole bunch of kids and stack them up. No.
Yeah.
I want to get to work, please, sir. Oh, the next one was the idea that BDSM is this weird perversion that needs to be overcome in order to enjoy a really fulfilling relationship.
Yeah.
And the idea that this is portraying not a BDSM relationship, but in fact an abusive one. Because BDSM is about exploring these kinks and these dynamics in private, first of all, in a sexual context only, not in general life for the most part, and that it's built on trust. They don't trust each other, Anna and Christian. She's regularly described as being afraid of him.
Yeah.
In the next book, he's going to admit that he's not actually into being a dom. He's a sadist who likes beating women who look like his mother, who he hates.
Oh, okay.
So
that complicates things.
It does rather. So it's not really a BDSM relationship being portrayed. The kinky toys he has seem to be just tools that he uses to explore his hatred of women like his mum.
What I was going to say, and I think this stands, is that I think, bear with me on this, I think E.L. James is a bad writer.
She seems unaware, of the abusive subtext of all this, which is frustrating.
Yes, I think this is it. Because there's a line that stood out to me where Christian says the idea of frightening Anna is abhorrent to him. And I wonder if Christian, in E.L. James's head, is a bit of a fucked up guy who is now... He has BDSM as a way of dealing with this. They do say this is all about trust.
Yes.
Several times. Do you trust me? Do you trust me? Do you trust me? But then, like you said... He also has these moments where he flouts that trust. She doesn't trust him. He doesn't trust her.
She's scared of him.
Afraid
of losing him.
Yeah, afraid of losing him. Yeah, for him to then turn around in the second book and say that he's a sadist. I wonder if E.L. James just doesn't realise the contradictions.
Maybe. Yeah, I think that's probably it, because she wants him to be the sort of damaged but ultimately lovable guy, but also for some reason wants to really push it in terms of him having real issues.
Because again, this book strikes me as a book who's about a woman who actually comes in and changes this guy. He realizes that he enjoys sharing a bed with her, doing normal couple things.
Yeah. Well, it's it's pretty standard. It's the idea of taking a rogue, the rakish rogue, and just showing him...
We all dream we can change him.
Yeah, exactly. It's very cliched, really, but by adding such abusive elements. I think for me, the whole point of it was that he was very unpleasant often in an unsexual way. Like the thing about food, where he would just put food in front of her when she's not hungry and just say, eat. And later on it gets rationale that he grew up like hungry on the streets, which is why he hates to see food wasted. But that was gross. That really made me feel uncomfortable, the idea of Anna just having to shovel bits of food down her throat when she didn't want to eat. I don't know why, but that upsets me. I mean, I know why, but it stood out as particularly upsetting, the food, because he also wants to control her exercise regime.
And maybe this is just the problem with writing a serial. You know?
Yeah.
Writing it in episodes quickly without having time to properly think and plan it out.
Maybe that's it. She had no idea where she was going. She was just carrying it on.
Yeah.
So he's a bad boyfriend, is the point. But none of that automatically makes Shades of Grey a bad novel. 199 Murmurs does.
Yeah.
But Christian Bale being a shitty boyfriend doesn't.
No.
Because there is a big difference between a novel portraying something and condoning it. Grey's an asshole.
Yeah.
But he's an attractive asshole, and there's definitely a demographic out there, even if it doesn't include us, around people who have sexual fantasies about being dominated in this way. Kink is about experimenting with things that scare you, and things that you're not supposed to like. That's what my kinks are generally about, all the dinner ladies. And a novel is a super safe place to explore those kinks, because if you don't want to, keep experiencing it, you can close the book and put it down and it's gone. It's like the quickest. It might stay with you, which will be a problem, but hopefully if, abuse is that much of a trigger for you, you'll have found out about the book beforehand. I didn't think the book was saying this is what real romance is or should look like, when men were men and women were women. It feels like just, hey, this would be kinky, wouldn't it? Let's think about it for a while in a safe environment. Oh, but then fucking E.L. James takes to Twitter and says there's no abuse in the novel, and it's just all fucked up.
Well, she's also an egomaniac, and she's not going to just accept that there's going to be abuse in the novel, is she? if she didn't, especially if she didn't intend it. And I think there's just some contradictions there that she didn't spot or didn't sort out, and
and some interesting stuff that I think she didn't realize she had done. Like, ending the book on them breaking up makes a lot of sense. It's upsetting. It's generally upsetting. I felt a little sad, because it's like, oh, who's he going to send kinky emails to now?
Yeah.
But he deserves it.
Yeah.
He went too far, and...
Oh, he absolutely deserves it.
Okay, look. I think we've fully described why 50 Shades of Grey is badly written, but fairly interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
I think so, yeah.
All right. Shall we have a one better thing? The one better thing. For me, the more interesting dynamic is the masochist side of things. And there's a very particular dynamic I'm interested in, which is explored at length in the novel Venus and Furs, by Leopold von Sascha Masoch. Sorry if I pronounced all of that wrong, but that's where the word masochism comes from. And then, interestingly, lately was kind of adapted into the film Duke of Burgundy by Peter Strickland. And I think that's the one I'll talk about. I'm on slightly better footing with films. The idea is, it starts off with a relationship which is clearly sub-dom between two women. There's a lesbian relationship and there's a definite dynamic there, but it very quickly becomes apparent that actually the sadist is not into it, but the masochist is, and she's the one dictating the terms and trying to control the role play that they're doing. And so it's interesting because it's the masochist who has all of the power, and the sadist is kind of consumed into it. And a very similar thing happens in Venus and Furs, where a man goes out to try and find a seductress and ends up making one. And it's about the sort of difficulties that the sadist has in trying to keep up with the demands and the expectations of the masochist. And it's an interesting sort of inverse portrayal of those roles I find really fascinating. So I'd recommend both of those, I think.
My issue with erotic prose a lot of the time is people try and make too much of it. It can be too flowery, or they try to make it too arty or too verbose, and it detracts from the very visceral sort of base feelings that make up sex. There's lust and sex and fucking and all these things. As abrasive as the sex scenes in American Psycho are, I probably can't recommend that for this, but what I'm gonna do instead is to recommend a couple of things. First off, Haruki Murakami writes very good sex scenes. They're very, very weird, but there's a very matter-of-factness about them.
Yeah.
It's almost anatomical in its simplicity, but it works. For something that is actually erotic and is embarrassing to read in public places would be Alan Moore's graphic novel, The Lost Girls.
Fuck yeah. Get it out. Get it to the library.
Ask your bookseller to order it in with a
A big smile on your face.
Whilst not breaking their gaze.
Has it come yet? You ordered it 12 minutes ago.
Oh, but I want it ever so much. It's a story about, now tell me if I'm wrong, is it Alice, Wendy from Peter Pan?
Yep. And Dorothy.
Dorothy. And Dorothy, it's just those three.
Yeah.
Post, their fairy tale endings, where they regale all of the sexual encounters of their lives up until then.
Yeah, it reimagines their stories as sort of sexual encounters.
Saucy retelling.
The one I always remember is the idea of Dorothy fucking three men, each of whom represents one of the... And one of the men she fucked, was a very courageous man but lacked spirit, whilst another one was a very dull boy who just needed a brain. It's very playful in that way. Peter Pan is probably the most disturbing.
Yeah.
With Captain Hook reimagined as a scary paedophile.
Oh, yeah. But having said that, it is erotic.
Oh, yeah. It really is.
Powerfully. I mean, it helps that it's visual as well.
Oh, we should mention Melinda Gibbons. Melinda Gebbie did the illustrations, and they are extraordinarily erotic.
So I guess that has an edge over E.L. James's 50 Shades of Grey for having the illustrations as well. But there's everything about it. It's not just the images that you're looking at; it's the mood it captures as well. And you're just looking at screenshots now.
I am, and it's not the erotica that's getting me. It's just how beautiful the color work is. It all looks like it's been done with like chalks. There's something very childish and beautiful about it. It's really gorgeous and very peculiarly English, I feel. It's very English pornography.
Isn't there the line, I was wetter than a Baptist picnic or something?
That's definitely Alan Moore. I'm not sure where in his wonderful bibliography it appears, but... okay, so check those out, and don't be embarrassed if you like 50 Shades of Grey. The one better thing. Whilst on the subject of things that are actually good... How about we give the ladies and some gents our top 10 favourite novels of all time?
Yeah!
Do you have any observations or concessions first? Because I would like to say there's no hard science fiction. The hard science fiction. There's none of that. There's no spaceships and foreign worlds and, distant planets. But I do love that stuff, and in particular the works of Ian M. Banks. It's just that as much as I love the collected... sort of body of the culture novels, no one of them ever really blew me away.
Well, what I've done is I've chosen a very literary top 10 that borrows from all genres. So we'll see exactly what I've taken in a moment. All I want to mention really are the honourable mentions who didn't quite make it. Siri Husved's The Blazing World.
Yeah.
Simone de Beauvoir's All Men Are Mortal.
Very prominently featured last time I saw a top 10 of yours. So
yes, it's almost there, but I read a lot of very, very good books in the last couple of years. David Copperfield's and Michael Faber's Crimson Petal and the White. I'll mention that a bit more later. Jane Eyre, Secret History by Donna Tartt.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Just unreal. And Laurent Binet's HHHH, which is one of the best historical novels that I've ever read.
Various works by Dostoevsky I've always loved. Kafka. Yeah, there's some wonderful authors. Yes, I have read quite a few of the sort of classical works. I'm a little distressed that none of them made the list. I didn't have room for Don Quixote or The Three Musketeers, which I'm a big fan of, or any James Joyce, whom I love, or Proust even. But I ended up going for the ones that had the biggest personal effect on me.
Yeah.
And I think that shows in the results you're going to get. So let's go. Do you want to start?
Sure. My number 10 is From the Fatherland with Love by Ryu Murakami. Nobu awoke on his American Army surplus cot to the squawking of a chicken. The bird was inside his tent, pecking at scraps of food on the ground. He took his time opening his eyes, then raised his left wrist to his face and squinted at his watch. The little hand pointed at 11, but that didn't necessarily mean anything. From the Fatherland with Love is Ryu Murakami's novel about North Korea's fictional invasion of Japan. Of a Japan that's failing economically, socially, and culturally. He's known, obviously, for writing these obscene little novels about Tokyo ultraviolence and gruesome fetishes and vengeful murder women. And while they're all very entertaining, this is written with more consideration, and it comes, I feel, from a deeper place. So it reflects Murakami's frustration with Japanese culture and politics, especially how stoicism can become passivity, can become impotency. So you have the crack North Korean military team that invade Japan's from a baseball game, the responding forces, and a gang of misfits who throw up the only real defense. But this isn't about drawing caricatures or demonizing North Korea. It's about looking at the differences between cultures and the people these cultures create.
Okay, my number 10 is Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, for mad people only. The day had gone by as days tend to. I had whiled away the hours, gently killing time in the only way I know how to. Unworldly and withdrawn as my life is. I'd spent a few hours working, poring over old books. For 2 hours I'd been in pain, the way people getting on in years are. I had taken a powder and rejoiced at the outcome, for pain could be outwitted. So, this was a book that my mother gave to me when I was a teenager. I think at that stage, she was already very well acquainted with my particular anxieties and social awkwardness. She said it meant a lot to her in her teenage years, and I read it, and it really is so relatable. It's just a character. Sorry, I should say that the novel concerns a man, a very vaguely disguised version of Hermann Hesse, who spends his time wandering around this city, ruminating on various lofty subjects such as classical music and poetry, and basically just being sick of everyone around him and how uneducated they are and how dull they are, and lamenting that he is absolutely dependent on people to feel love, and yet also has a strong instinct to shy away from everyone. It's basically just about someone who's too much of an asshole to enjoy life and its simple pleasures. And Hess says that it's actually his most misunderstood, with most people focusing on the very destructive first half of the book and not the redemptive second half. So there's a bit of a Fight Club thing going on, where it's like, no, you weren't meant to be inspired by this bit. This is the bit where I'm talking about the things I hate about myself. Yeah, it's great. Let's all do that. I'm a Steppenwolf too. You shouldn't want to...
Right.
Fine. Congratulations. I'm just like Vicky Pollard. Anyway, it's about overcoming pretension and also self-labeling, because one of the things that he meets a woman, Hermione, who teaches him that there aren't just two versions to himself, a wolf and a man. There's loads of versions within him. And the book is telling you to keep exploring yourself because you are endless. And don't settle for any one thing that you've decided that you are, because you have the capacity for extraordinary, endlessly crazy things. Speaking of which, I really respect a book that is just willing to turn into sheer fucking madness in its final chapters, which Steppenwolf does.
Number 9, The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Dawn was coming. The Waystone Inn lay in silence, and it was a silence of 3 parts. The most obvious part was a vast, echoing quiet made by things that were lacking. If there had been a storm, raindrops would have tapped and pattered against the cellar's vines behind the inn. Thunder would have muttered and rumbled and chased the silence down the road like fallen autumn leaves. If there had been travellers stirring in their rooms, they would have stretched and grumbled the silence away like fraying, half-forgotten dreams. If there had been music... But no, of course there was no music. In fact, there were none of these things, and so the silence remained.
Beautiful.
This is the second book in the tale of Quoth and his many adventures of being cool at magic and bedding sweet babes. Seriously, it's a recent entry, as I only got around to reading the first 2 in the Kingkiller Chronicles series because, yes, the third hasn't been released yet, and I'm not going to add my frustration about it here. He's trying.
He's hanging out with George R. R. Martin all day.
Yeah.
Flicking beans at each other and giggling.
He's addressed it at least more than George R. R. Martin has. George R. R. Martin's just been like, I don't really appreciate everyone saying that I'm going to die soon, so I better hurry up.
What a prick. I can't believe you said that.
Yeah. It's probably the shortest amount of time it's taken me to read 1,000 pages. It not only does it have that page-turner quality that good genre fiction has in spades, but it's just an incredible world that he's made here. It irons out a few of the knowing winks and elbow nudges of the first novel. Quite a few times there'd be a little line like, oh, things only happen that way in stories, and then he'd go on to subvert expectations, except that he just set it up, so it was a bit, But in this one, he just forewent. He foregoes all of this, and he just pulls the rug from under you at every opportunity. It made reading The Wise Man's Fear a really nerve-wracking and uncomfortable experience. I was treated mean and kept thoroughly keen. The sort of the physics of this world are as complex as if they've been established for thousands of years. And I think that's what I really like about this world. It feels old and established. We know that Quoth is going to end up as somebody great who does something terrible, but you're reading his formative years and how he goes from strength to strength, becoming more powerful, drawing people to him who can't help but like him or hate him. It's the stories as well that are told. Within this story, there are story upon story. There's lore upon myth upon legend. Everyone is a storyteller in this, and it's as well as the whole construct of the novel being him regaling his life story to a scribe that's been looking for him. Within that story, there are countless stories being told. it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about us being a tribe of storytellers. This is what life is made up of. Our experiences are made up of. We tell stories. That adds in no small part to the feeling of things being old and established in this world.
My number 9 is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. The 12 men congregated in the smoking room of the Crown Hotel gave the impression of a party accidentally met. From the variety of their comportment and dress, frock coats, tailcoats, Norfolk jackets with buttons of horn, yellow moleskin, cambric, and twill, they might have been 12 strangers on a railway car, each bound for a separate quarter of a city that possessed fog and tides enough to divide them. Indeed, the studied isolation of each man as he pored over his paper, or leaned forward to tap his ashes into the grate, or placed the splay of his hand upon the baize to take his shot at billiards, conspired to form the very type of bodily silence that occurs late in the evening on a public railway, deadened here, not by the slur and clunk of the coaches, but by the fat clatter of the rain. So the novel features 12 main characters, each of which is based on one of the 12 star signs, the zodiac, and the characteristics generally associated with them. Secondary characters are based on heavenly bodies in our solar system, such as the sun, moon, etc. And the book is split into 12 parts, each half the size of the preceding part, to mirror the phases of the moon. So, a terribly contrived mess? No, because in spite of all that structure and limitations that she's put on herself, I didn't notice any of it in the book proper. It was only when later, when reading up on reviews, that people more knowledgeable about such things observed that this is what she had done. The characters are amazing. They're so fleshed out. They don't feel like just a list of, Mystic Meg caricatures. They are their own people, and the world is full and extraordinary, and it's set on the New Zealand coast. Yes, in fact, the story is about Walter Moody, a man who arrives from Edinburgh to make his fortunes on the Gold Coast of New Zealand. And whilst there, he stumbles into a room with 12 strangers, all of whom are discussing a series of unsolved mysteries on the island, such as the attempted suicide of a drug fiend, the disappearance of a wealthy young man, and the sudden appearance of a very large fortune in a very poor man's hut. And then it goes about describing how this all happened in flashback and in various stories, and it's just such an incredibly complex and highly inventive story where sudden meaning is lended to things that seemed inconsequential in another timeline, and it's just so compelling how fun this plot is. It's an intricate plot that unfolds in beautiful language and a brisk pace. Speaking of books that fly by, this is 800 pages long, but I think I read it in a few weeks. It's one of my favorite novels because of the richness of its prose and the density of the world that it portrays. And it's just really well accomplished. It's like a place I like going back to.
Great. My number 8 is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke.
Yay.
Some years ago, there was in the city of York a society of magicians. They met upon the third Wednesday of every month and read each other long, dull papers upon the history of English magic. They were gentlemen magicians, which is to say they had never harmed anyone by magic, nor ever done anyone the slightest good. In fact, to own the truth, not one of these magicians had ever cast the smallest spell, nor by magic caused one leaf to tremble upon a tree, made one mote of dust to alter its course, or changed a single hair upon anyone's head. But with this one minor reservation, they enjoyed a reputation as some of the wisest and most magical gentlemen in Yorkshire. Set in an England where magic is all but dead, most unlike this one, just one magician remains, the reclusive Mr. Norrell, who's bent on owning or quashing all instances of magic on these fair isles. The Napoleonic Wars are raging, and when Jonathan Strange emerges as a new magician with very little reading or academic learning, a gentleman's rivalry begins. But the dangers of dealing with darker, deeper powers than theirs is ever present. The man with the thistledown hair befriends Strange's wife, Arabella, and as the two magicians' influence grows and she begins to lose her grip on the physical world, they must ally and stop dark powers from taking everything they love. Now, with my poor words, I've made it sound horribly contrived, but like another of my entries further up, there's a world in the footnotes. It's the detail here, the allusions to literary movements and characters from already established works from the 19th century, and the care given to every character, every setting is so steeped in a very strange sort of realism that it doesn't seem so far-fetched to believe that all of this really did take place when Susanna Clarke says it did. It's irreverent where it needs to be, and when it's not, it's dark. It's really, really dark. It's also another story that doesn't take any prisoners. It doesn't let us a simple thing like literary norms get in the way of, really chewing up your heart.
Good stuff. My number 8 is Birdsong by Sebastian Faulks. The Boulevard du Cange was a broad, quiet street that marked the eastern flank of the city of Amiens. The wagons that rolled in from Lille and Arras in the north made directly into the tanneries and mills of the Saint-Lô quarter without needing to use the rutted, leafy road. The town side of the boulevard backed onto substantial gardens which were squared off and apportioned with civic precision to the houses they adjoined. On the damp grass were chestnut trees, lilac and willows, cultivated to give shade and quietness to their owners. So, this was one of the novels I had to read for my A-level in English literature. And show off that I was, and deeply insecure as I was, let's go with, I read it in a weekend and accidentally fell in love with it. It's the story of a young man, Stephen. His name is Stephen, and he goes to France to stay with a family in 1910. Tensions are already beginning to arise. He embarks on a wild affair with a married woman. And then, upon the cessation of that affair, we cut forward to World War I, and he's in the trenches. And then, shortly after that, we cut even further forward to a storyline in the 1970s in which his granddaughter is investigating his story. So it's an epic spanning a century of time, telling this huge story about this family, all dealing with, in some way or another, the fallout of World War I, albeit from very different vantage points. And it's the war sequences that really stood out to me. The first day of the Somme and the battles beneath the trenches in the claustrophobic tunnels, they are told in visceral detail. In England, you learn about World War I from primary school onwards, but this was the first time I remember really feeling the horror of it and the sheer terror that must have gripped so many millions of young men who went off to fight this war. The sheer trauma inflicted on an entire generation. And there's so much life and beauty, especially in that first section set in pre-war France, but it's then just about the extent to which the men are just fucking broken. And it's truly devastating. 5 stars!
My number 7 is Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace. I am seated in an office, surrounded by heads and bodies. My posture is consciously congruent to the shape of my hard chair. This is a cold room in university administration, wood-walled, Remington-hung, double-windowed against the November heat, insulated from administrative sounds by the reception area outside, at which Uncle Charles, Mr. DeLint and I were lately received. And I like that tells you absolutely nothing about what this 1,200-page book is about. Speaking of, get your 2 bookmarks ready, because you're going to get a severe case of the howling fantods if you don't follow the footnotes as well. Infinite Jest. A film is making the rounds that is so good you can't do anything but watch it until you die. The Wheelchair Assassins are a Quebecois fringe group planning a major geopolitical event. Oh, and almost everyone else in Boston is hopelessly addicted to something, whether it's booze, weed, or secrecy. So rather than try to summarise any of what happens in this 80,000-page novel, I'll just say, as well as being caustic and hilarious, endlessly inventive and original, it's actually a physically painful look at addiction in all its forms. The struggles of everybody to just get on with living. In the light of David Foster Wallace's suicide, it makes it harsher, but it fits. So it can be a hard read, but it's also such a pleasure. What an amazing mind this guy had. Please, please, please just give this one a go.
My next one is The Dice Man by Luke Reinhardt, a.k.a. George Cockcroft. Oh, hang on a minute. That's a 5. Oh, sincere. Shit. It's the dullest option. I am a large man, with big butcher's hands, great oak thighs, rock-jawed head, and massive thick lens glasses. I'm 6'4" and weigh close to 230 pounds. I look like Clark Kent, except when I take off my business suit, I am barely faster than my wife, only slightly more powerful than men half my size, and leap buildings not at all, no matter how many leaps I am given. The Dice Man is wickedly funny, still. It has a tantalizing premise. Oh, sorry, which I should explain. It's about a man who suddenly decides that the only way to live completely free is to completely destroy the ego and your own sense of identity. And the only way to do that, or to start doing that, is to start making all of the important decisions in your life by throwing a dice. Assigning options to it, and just following whatever it does, no matter how horrific the option is. It's a tantalizing premise, because you just want to see... It's like an experiment, a social experiment. You just want to see what he's going to do, what he's going to force himself to do next. And, it extends to things like experimenting with homosexuality, various drugs. In the end, murder becomes on the cards. It's constantly entertaining. The philosophical propositions that it offers are engaging and fairly disturbing at times. But I really remember the times of genuine sadness regarding his stupid commitment to this ridiculous dice life that he has, which is, interesting, but it's like the impact on his family that he loves and whom has so well written is just heartbreaking. I don't know, my enduring memories are just fabulous dialogue, shocking moments, and being utterly riveted to every fucking word of it. I've never considered the dice life myself. There's a fucking sentence. But I can imagine how satisfying it would be to sacrifice free will to chance. There's something reassuring about it. I know, it's very strange.
My number 6, The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. On February the 24th, 1815, the lookout at Notre Dame de la Garde signalled the arrival of the three-master Pharaon coming from Smyrna, Trieste, and Naples. As usual, a coastal pilot immediately left the port, sailed hard by the Chateau d'If, and boarded the ship between the Cap de Morgeau and the island of Rio. This is the ultimate and original adventure novel. Edmond Dante is wrongly imprisoned for treason and imprisoned in the Chateau d'If. His jealous rival Guy Pearce framed him and stepped into his marital shoes. In prison, he's taught all manner of sword and wordplay by a fellow prisoner and is made privy to the existence of a fantastic wealth. Using all of these, he exacts delicious, comprehensive, and devastating revenge on all who wronged him. It's the original page-turner, just constant intrigue and fun. If you're looking to read your first classical novel and don't know where to start, I would recommend this one.
Yeah.
Like all best literary fiction, it doesn't limit itself to some dreary kitchen sink genre. It takes the best of show and drives forward with truly amazing prose. It's written with such skill, and every speck of revenge is utterly delicious. And
there is something at the theatre. Hold on a moment, let me just get the name of this. The Grand Grenoir. There is to it, the sort of high theatre of it all. Yeah. My number 6 is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. My name is Kathy H. I'm 31 years old, and I've been a carer now for over 11 years. That sounds long enough, I know, but actually they want me to go on for another 8 months until the end of this year. That'll make it almost exactly 12 years. Now, I know my being a carer so long isn't necessarily because they think I'm fantastic at what I do. There are some really good carers who've been told to stop after just 2 or 3 years, and I can think of one carer at least who went on for a full 14 years despite being a complete waste of space. So I'm not trying to boast, but I know for a fact they've been pleased with my work, and by and large, I have too. So, it's a very strange feeling I get when I think about Never Let Me Go. Something so sweet in such a quaint and terribly English way, and so full of youthful naivete and big hearts and silliness, is also something so diabolically cruel. A nightmarish scenario, initially steeped in mystery and then inescapable in its bluntness, and yet also still so wrapped in euphemism and childish stories to try and get around it. I should explain. It seems to be, at least initially, about a group of children attending a school. But there's something strange about this school that we're not told. There's various references to things that don't quite make sense and make it very special, and talk of a purpose, a very special purpose that everyone must fulfill. It seems to be about 3 friends and the way in which they intertwine and sort of relate to each other. Ishiguro keeps writing novels about frustrated love that's barred by expectation, by circumstance, by memory-stealing snakes. The Buried Giant was weird. And here by just the entire world, and an incredibly sinister dystopian system that's been put in place that you find out about as the thing goes on. And there's this powerful sense of the young being betrayed by the old, and the young having to accept huge, terrifying things that they really shouldn't have to at this stage. And just the idea that they've been so thoroughly betrayed. There's a heartbreak and an outrage to it. It generally just makes me tear up just thinking about the situation and the sort of sweetness of the characters trapped in it, but it's just one of the most sadly charming books that I've ever read. And I hate that Ishiguro can do sweet so well, because he does mean things with it. Completion awaits.
You just made me think about Never Let Me Go now.
Never do that.
Oh, speaking of crying like a fucking child, my number 5 is A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mystery.
Oh, God.
How's this going to end? The morning express, bloated with passengers, slowed to a crawl, then lurched forward suddenly, as though to resume full speed. The train's brief deception jolted its riders. The bulge of humans hanging out of the doorway distended perilously, like a soap bubble at its limit. Set in India in the later half of the 20th century, so post-Empire and smack bang in the middle of the emergency, the book follows a group of 4 new friends and how their friendship develops against the tumultuous political backdrop of India throughout the 70s and into the 80s. This is very nicely told in the form of a patchwork quilt that's being worked on by Dina, I think, and then later on by the rest of the friends. The relationship is unlikely in itself because taking place in a country in which a caste system operates, as well as severe political corruption, cronyism, and petty vengeance, almost indiscriminate. Is their newfound place in the world enough to protect them against these evil forces? Well, considering what we've just said, probably not. So, but don't worry, because it's not a spoiler. It's not really about that. It's better to see it as a snapshot of turmoil and the attempt to find humanity within. It's a beautiful book and one that's always well received when I recommend it. Oprah really liked it as well, so there's that. Got going for it. But going back to the title, A Fine Balance, he includes a line of Balzac's at the beginning of this book, and it says, "Holding this book in your hand, sinking back in your soft armchair, you will say to yourself, perhaps it will amuse me, and after you've read this story of great misfortunes, you will no doubt dine well, blaming the author for your own insensitivity, accusing him of wild exaggeration and flights of fancy. But rest assured, this tragedy is not a fiction. All is true." And that very nicely sums it up.
My number 5 is On the Beach by Neville Shute. Lieutenant Commander Peter Holmes of the Royal Australian Navy woke soon after dawn. He lay drowsily for a while, lulled by the warm comfort of Mary sleeping beside him, watching the first light of the Australian sun upon the cretonne curtains of their room. He knew from the sun's rays that it was about 5 o'clock. Very soon the light would wake his baby daughter Jennifer in her cot, and then they would have to get up and start doing things. No need to start before that happened. He could lie a little while longer. It is about a future in which atomic bombs have gone off. There is a nuclear wind drifting around the world, killing off its inhabitants. In the depressing and isolated city of Melbourne, a group of survivors just await death as it gradually breezes around the world. There are some brief distractions, such as one of the naval commander, the one I just read about there. He is told that there is a signal coming from Washington, D.C., and they sail a boat up there to find out if someone's actually managed to survive this shit show. It does not look good. So it's another super dreary novel about the inevitability of death. Everyone points to this being an anti-nuclear novel, and it is, and that's very important, but for me, the radiation could be anything. It could be a tidal wave. It could be an asteroid heading towards the Earth. What matters is that it's death. Undeniable, unavoidable death, and it's on its way. So it's about how the characters busy themselves. It has a really sad but profound message about not giving up in the face of absolute and certain death, a theme that is very important in my number 1 book as well. Characters plant trees that they'll never get to see. They grow gardens, the fruits of which they'll never taste, and they attend classes to perfect skills that they won't live to use. Death frightens me like nothing else, and one of the scariest things about it for me is its ability to render pointless things that are done with love. So the idea of striving and overcoming that, and seeing the worth in doing something simply for the moment in which you are doing it, is something I can really relate to and kind of aspire to. Fuck me, this is a depressing exercise. Should we talk about 50 Shades again?
That's bad, isn't it?
It was bad. It's also just really well drawn, with a very quaint image of this little Australian town of Melbourne and its doomed inhabitants. Doomed they are. It's about the profound beauty of simple pleasures.
Yeah, well, I think come this, what is it, episode 87 of One Good Thing podcast, I think everyone pretty much knows that the two of us fear death more than anything else.
Hence the podcast.
Yep.
We'll live forever here.
My number 4, The Savage Detectives by Roberto Bolaño. November the 2nd. I've been cordially invited to join the Visceral Realists. I accepted, of course. There was no initiation ceremony. It was better that way. This book was my introduction to Bolaño. It's split into 3 parts, but basically follows the hunt for a legendary Mexican poet by Arturo Bolaño and Ulises Lima, who are recurring characters in Bolaño's work. And I think Arturo Bolaño is Bolaño's alter ego and narrates a lot of his other works. The first section follows a 17-year-old named Juan Garcia Madero, who becomes acquaintances with the 2 poets and joins a group called the Visceral Realists. The second part is more than 40 narrators regaling stories of Bolaño and Lima, their adventures, their struggles, their poetry, telling a life of work and abuse through these other voices. And then the third takes us back to Juan, Bolaño and Lima as they get closer to this poet. I'm assured that reading Bolaño in Spanish is even more transportative than the English, but that's what struck me as I read this book over the course of several mornings drinking black coffee on the hour-long bus commute to work I had then. It sounds redundant, but Bolaño tells stories. Not a story from beginning to end, but a collection of stories that may begin and end somewhere, but it's really not relevant. What matters is the feel of the whole as you come closer and closer to the conclusion. Bolaño is a superb writer in this respect. constant source of inspiration and wonder when I read him. He's the kind of person that I want to write. His prose is fluid. It gives the sense of everything already having happened, and this lends itself to this idea of storytelling. And again, this tribal thing, it's not just as simple as a novel. Things are constantly happening, constantly going on, and all you need to do is just open the book at a page and see what's going on in this corner of the world, or this corner and this corner. It harks back to his early career as a poet, as a firebrand in Chile, and again speaks of what could have been. It's an absolutely stunning book.
Right, let's have something a bit more adventurous than my constant trudges through death and misery. Larry McMurtry's Lonesome Dove. Haha, fooled you.
oh boy, it was a joke all along. That was a twist.
When Augustus came out on the porch, the blue pigs were eating a rattlesnake. Not a very big one. It had probably just been crawling around looking for shade when it ran into the pigs. They were having a fine tug-of-war with it, and its rattling days were over. The sow had it by the neck, and the shoat by the tail. "You pigs git," Augustus said, kicking the shoat. "Head on down to the creek if you want to eat that snake." It was the porch he begrudged them, not the snake. Pigs on the porch just made things hotter, and things were already hot enough.
Enter Tommy Lee Jones.
For a great epic yarn. On one hand, it is actually a big bunch of beautifully drawn characters setting off on a grand adventure. It's about two old cowboys retired from the business, tired of violence and all the rest of it, and they decide to go on one last, after a reckless character re-enters their lives, they decide to go on one last adventure across the United States from Texas to Montana.
Right.
They decide to head on up to Montana in order to drive a significant amount of cattle up there, thereby making a fortune. Along the way, they encounter danger, some interesting characters, and just experience the epic landscape of the American West, the endless frontiers, the sublime nature, and just the boundless sense of adventure and possibility that comes from this extraordinarily large place. To come back to the darkness, though, death follows these men.
Oh, yeah.
Sudden, violent, meaningless death. There's one particular death in this that is told from the perspective of the man that's dying. He is clubbed in the head and then feels his assailant undoing his trousers, but he doesn't have the energy to fight back, and instead he just sort of drifts into seductive and very deep sleep. And then we cut to another character's perspective who stumbles upon that man's body to discover that, in fact, after he had slipped away into that, sleep of death, his genitals had been cut off and shoved into his mouth. So there's the inhumanity of that. Usually that would be sort of set dressing to show that there are cannibals afoot, but it's not. It's happened to a character you've known well for a long time, and an obscene thing has happened to him that's utterly dehumanized him, and he didn't care. In his last moments, he was so tired and just thought, I'd better just sleep. That's the thing to do now, and he can just do what he wants. And
my God.
It's one of the scariest things I've ever read. Hi-ho, Silver, away! Da, 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 da.
Yeah, there's a raw power in one of the villains in that book, and also just the overriding sense of the insignificance of life. Yeah,
it's like maybe she'll never fall in love with you. Don't worry, she might get scalped by an Indian in the next the next sequence. McMurtry himself actually said of the novel, "I thought I had written about a harsh time and some pretty harsh people, but to the public at large, I produced something nearer to an idealization. Instead of a poor man's inferno filled with violence, faithlessness, and betrayal, it actually delivered a kind of gone with the wind of the West, a turnabout I'll be mulling for a long, long time." So you're not meant to enjoy it, you pricks.
Yeah.
You're enjoying it wrong.
Yeah, that's definitely not what I thought.
No, fuck.
100% tragic, ultra-violent hell that I'm glad that I'm never a part of.
Thank God.
Did I lend you that?
Yeah, you did, initially. I believe we're in China, in fact. And
that's the point. I was reading that in China. Yeah, of course. That changed a lot.
Changed the context. It's funny, it's dark, it's thrilling, and it has a whole bunch of moments in it that you will never forget.
Okay, well, my number 3 is The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami.
Beautiful.
Get your thinking gear around this totally fucking Murakami opening. When the phone rang, I was in the kitchen, boiling a pot full of spaghetti and whistling along to an FM broadcast of the overture to Rossini's The Thieving Magpie, which has to be the perfect music for cooking pasta.
Didn't you mean the Beatles? Something by the Beatles?
Now that reads a lot like John Crace's digested read of Haruki Murakami. It's a jazz-loving, whiskey-drinking, spaghetti-cooking guy who likes women with nice ears and is looking for a cat. And that is basically It is basically what the book's about. Other than that, Toru Okada's wife goes missing and he embarks on a slow sort of investigation that brings him across all kinds of weirdness. There's so much in this book to go into, but his Toru's investigations brings him across a pair of twins with weird sexual tendencies. He stumbles into a whole period of Japanese military history surrounding the Second World War and I think a Russian who likes skinning people alive. And all of this plays into the mystery of where his wife is. Whilst he's doing this, he's learning more about sort of dark politics in Japan, powers beyond his ken and his control. And he learns that with the help of a woman who either kisses, sticks her tongue in, or pokes her fingers into dark patches that are appearing on his own body, he's allowed to enter different realms, I think is what this is. There's also a woman with a very nice ear who has slight mental problems and has to go away and leave him alone for a long, long time. It's so hard to précis a Murakami novel without it sounding ridiculous. What really makes it special is the same sort of calm precision that a Zen monk would apply to one question in a full 24 hours of thinking. It's really hypnotic to read, and why the Wind Up Bird Chronicle is more special than any of his other novels. It feels the most accomplished. It's also a quiet study of loneliness, and he also does that really well. What you get with Murakami is a real sense of... He writes with the ultimate sense of music, of food, of the literature that his characters read, and a really wonderful sense of time and place. But also timelessness and placelessness. So it's a really weird mix of stuff that just makes Murakami this really mesmerizing read. He's inimitable.
Okay. Right, my number 3 is V by Thomas Pynchon. Christmas Eve, 1955. Benny Profane, wearing black Levi's, suede jacket, sneakers, and big cowboy hat, happened to pass through Norfolk, Virginia. Given to sentimental impulses, he thought he'd look in on the Sailor's Grave, his old tin cans tavern on East Main Street. He got there by way of the arcade, at the east main end of which sat an old street singer with a guitar and an empty sterno can for donations. Out in the street, a chief yeoman was trying to urinate in the gas tank of a 54 Packard patrician, and 5 or 6 seaman apprentices were standing around him, giving him encouragement. I adore Pynchon. I'm still catching up on his works. They are very dense and challenging novels. I was hung up on Gravity's Rainbow for about a year of my life. I have now read it 3 times, which is actually maybe why I prefer V, his very first novel, because I haven't agonized over it. I haven't ruthlessly interrogated it for meaning and nuance and the way in which it's interconnected. It sits with me now as this gorgeous, exotic, and utterly baffling dream, like my weekend with Susan, the dinner lady. It's not a book to be made sense of. It's a little collection of sublime episodes, including alligator hunting in the sewers underneath Manhattan, a Venetian art heist, a murderous ballet performance, the quest for a decent nose job in Manhattan, a Southwest African siege, and of course the ever-present V. It's a beautiful set of episodes which all feel like novels in their own right. You're suddenly introduced to these characters who have these great dynamics and fabulous names as well. I should mention a few of them, because Pynchon is literally the best person at naming characters ever.
Absolutely.
In V, you have Benny Profane, Rachel Owlglass, Herbert Stencil, Mafia Winsome, Deb Sensei, Esther Harvitz, McClintock Sphere, Ferguson Mixolydian, Shale Shonmaker, and of course Pig Bodine.
Of course.
He's got these wonderful characters who all have these big personalities and just a huge sense of life to them, no matter how briefly they're sort of mentioned. It's like a whirlwind tour through the imagination of a deeply intelligent but very silly and playful mind. There's often profanity in there, people urinating into various things and sort of kinky sex carried out in... At one point, and just an utter sense of reckless playfulness. At one stage, a character decides that he's going to apply for a job because he was sitting in a park thinking about a previous sexual encounter and noticed that his erection put a crease into the newspaper on his lap, just on the point where he decided, where there was a job thing. So he decided, I should go here. And there's just a wonderful madcapness to it as well. It's just that craziness that kind of makes sense, but is also utterly ridiculous that I adore. And I mean, just his ability to summon up a Venetian art heist out of nothing is just so richly evocative. It's beautiful, and I love Pynchon for that. And V is so far my favorite that I've read, but I'm going to keep going.
All right, number 2 for me is A Death in the Family by Karl Ove Knausgård. For the heart, life is simple. It beats for as long as it can, then it stops. Sooner or later, one day, this pounding action will cease of its own accord, and the blood will begin to run towards the body's lowest point, where it will collect in a small pool, visible from the outside as a dark, soft patch on ever whiter skin. As the temperature sinks, the limbs stiffen and the intestines drain. These changes in the first hours occur so slowly and take place with such inexorability that there is something almost ritualistic about them, as though life capitulates according to specific rules, a kind of gentleman's agreement, to which the representatives of death also adhere, inasmuch as they always wait until life has retreated before they launch their invasion of the new landscape.
Oh, I feel sick.
This is the first book in a cycle of 6, given the name My Struggle, which in Norwegian is Min Kamp. Basically, it's about the life of Karl Ove Knausgård. This one specifically is about the death of his father, and it's full of his ruminations on their relationship, his upbringing, and how it's affected him and made him the person that he is today. Thrown into that is some incredible analysis of the most mundane events of anyone's life. It's really riveting and kind of mind-blowing revelations about art and literature thrown in, depending on where his tangents go. It's essentially autobiographical with a literary bent, and it's endearing as much as it is unbelievable that he'd write with this level of honesty about his closest friends and family. It has actually led to lawsuits and a lot of fallings out in his personal life. But and he deals with that in the 6th book, where he has to weigh up his literary convictions and the real world scrutiny that they get, and why does he write? His prose is so focused and brilliant that even the most mundane activity, like paying for ice cream with a contactless credit card, reads like Proust biting into his Madeleine. Whether or not you identify with Knausgård as a person, it's his observations that are universal, and it's utterly disarming. Reading Knausgård is getting a sense of what it means to live, and trying to make sense of the endless stories that make up a life, and accepting what beauty there is, whether it comes from the natural world or within our own minds. And with Knausgård, it can come from both, and he expounds on that. The full 6 books is the most astonishing work I've ever read. The thing is, the friend who recommended I read Knausgård didn't even bother trying to describe the work. Just read it, he said, and I did. And when I recommend it to everyone I meet, I do exactly the same. Honestly, it defies definition. When you look at the book with his bearded face on the front, it looks like a terrible Scandinavian crime novel. When you try and tell people that it's just an autobiography, it seems really self-indulgent and not worth reading. But it defies definition. It surpasses any of that. You just please read it.
Okay, my number 2 is We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. Dear Franklin, I'm unsure why one trifling incident this afternoon has moved me to write to you. But since we've been separated, I may most miss coming home to deliver the narrative curiosities of my day. The way a cat might lay mice at your feet, the small humble offerings that couples proffer after foraging in separate backyards. Incredibly well-observed little moments of domesticity aside, it's just gut punches from here, I'm afraid, guys, in terms of my favourite novels. One of the most utterly riveting, provocative, and insightful novels I've ever read. And it's very hard when talking about it not to focus on the devastating final 15 pages or so, which is just one of the greatest, cruelest rug pulls ever in any work of literature. But beyond that, there is just a wonderfully melancholy story of fear and frustration. The novel is about a woman writing letters to her husband describing their early life, specifically the birth of her first child, Kevin. She talks about her anxieties and her fears that she may not feel the unconditional love that she is expected and promised to feel upon the birth of her child. Because I think everybody feels a sort of existential need to procreate and just assumes that it'll fall into place once you've done so. And in the novel, Eva, the character, she's getting to 35, the time when menopause may start soon, and she may soon become too old to have kids. She has a kid because she's worried it'll become too late soon. That's the only reason. Yeah. And what if that's not good enough? What if that's not a good enough reason to do this, and the child doesn't inspire that spark of love, that feeling of bonding? And what if the kid can tell that you don't, that you're faking it, and as a result becomes a monster? There's a great depth to the dynamic between Ava and Kevin. It's incredibly readable initially as a series of cruel, bitchy, but rather pithy and clever exchanges between the two of them as they poke holes in each other's facades. But the more you read it, the more brilliantly observed it is. And this idea that what if this kid becomes just a little mirror, just to shout back any insecurities she has. And reading it again, what becomes most fascinating about it is the idea that Kevin is just a very concentrated storage point of all of Eva's most cynical and negative parts of herself. And in hating him, it's just about her own real self-loathing. Contrasted with this is the utterly heartbreaking aftermath of the event, where she's just absolutely hated in this town, receives nothing but pity and scorn from the people around her. But the hardest thing is just that she's completely unable to forgive herself, and that this is a confession that's happening of terrible sins. And it's just really devastating.
Certainly is, my man. My number one
is Barry's Big Book of Balls.
Barry's Big Book of Balls by Barry Ballboy. My number one is Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell.
Yay.
Thursday, 7th of November. Beyond the Indian hamlet, upon a forlorn strand, I happened upon a trail of recent footprints. Through rotting kelp, sea coconuts, and bamboo, the tracks led me to their maker, a white man, his trousers and pea jacket rolled up, sporting a kempt beard and an outsized beaver, shoveling and sifting the cindery sand with a teaspoon so intently that he noticed me only after I had hailed him from 10 yards away. Thus it was I made the acquaintance of Dr. Henry Goose, surgeon to the London nobility. An adventurous Russian doll of a novel where 6 people across 6 locations and 6 centuries are seemingly connected by a birthmark shaped like a comet. Each of them is put in some peril and has some degree of control removed from their lives. They fight the shackles and leave an account of their struggle in a format that the next person in the line can access. So the first person, Adam Ewing, who I just read from there, writes a diary in the 18th century that Robert Frobisher can pick up in the 19th, who writes a diary and also a piece of music that Louisa Ray comes across in the 1970s, feeling like she's heard it before.
Sorry to interject. Wasn't Robert Frobisher's a series of letters?
That's it, of course, thank you.
A series of letters to his lover, David
Sixsmith,
Ewing?
that's it, yeah.
Sixsmith, sorry.
Yeah,
David
Sixsmith,
Ewing's
thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, it's what I loved about it was that it moved away from realism, and David Mitchell was an adventurous writer from his very first novel. He's a master character writer as well, and most of his novels demonstrate to some extent how easily he can shift from one person to the next. But Cloud Atlas is his most accomplished. The similarities between stories speaks of a universality of experience for the human condition throughout history, and it's told in the understanding that life very much goes on, that the world isn't fair or nice, but there is beauty in many of the places you look, so you better pay attention. As these characters go through the same sort of stages, there are moments of incredibly painful beauty when characters feel they've taken all they can, and the more he builds on the more he builds on this world, the greater a sense of beauty within I think you get. I don't often remember final lines, but this is one of the most beautiful I've ever read. Also, the books of David Mitchell are a universe themselves. The Diary of Adam Ewing is picked up in his novel The Thousand Autumns of Jakob de Zoet. Robert Frobisher's romantic interest, Eva, I think, shows up in Black Swan Green. It's very gratifying to see where he goes with it next in every consecutive novel. It's just a really amazing world that he's created. The tagline that was used for the book was "Souls cross ages like clouds cross skies." It's a really beautiful sentiment, really concisely put, and that's a lot of what David Mitchell does best.
Lovely. Okay, my number one is The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
Oh.
And this is my favourite first sentence of anything ever. It's perfect, just the rhythm of it, the content, what it's implying. It's gorgeous. When he woke in the woods in the dark and the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Nights dark beyond darkness and the days more grey than each one that had gone before, like the onset of some cold glaucoma dimming away the world. His hand rose and fell softly with each precious breath. He pushed away the plastic tarpaulin and raised himself in the stinking robes and blankets and looked toward the east for any light, but there was none. My experience of McCarthy is interesting. I picked up The Road thinking it had an interesting premise and expecting, I think, something a bit more pulpy than it was. And then, motivated by this, I read all of the other books. He's written 10 books in total. It's the only time I think I've read the entire bibliography of an author, including his play, The Sunset Limited, and his screenplay for The Counselor. So I just adore the way the man writes. The prose, the bleakness, the extraordinary sort of landscapes he creates. But interestingly, if I were to order McCarthy's books in order of preference, they would almost certainly be a reverse order chronologically.
Huh.
Every book was an improvement on the previous one, almost without exception. And The Road is the culmination of that. And also, interestingly, the first book he wrote after having a son. He had a son very late in life.
Ah.
And yeah, there's something about it that brings a whole new element to his writing. He always wrote about very bleak worlds and people doing desperate things at any cost. But now, there's something very precious and sweet and believable at the heart of it that's at risk. But with all of that vulnerability, that child brings also the hope that is missing from so many of his books. It's a sad and bleak but very compelling story. It's riveting. It's a journey, I should explain. A father and a son are traveling through a dystopian landscape, heading south in the hope of encountering the ocean, which they feel may yield some peace, they hope. But really, it's just something to do. The prose is stark, forgoing almost all punctuation, which McCarthy does in almost all of his books, but it's even more stripped out here with just single, 2-word sentences occupying a line. It feels very stripped away of any pretenses, and yet is also, as you've just heard, incredibly eloquent and lyrical in its prose. There are 2 very specific moments in this book that scare the living shit out of me every time, even to think about. One involves a basement, and the other a barbecue. And in both examples, the only thing I can bear to think about, aside from the viscerally horrible thing that's happening at the heart of both of those moments, from the barbecue, I think, the father quickly leads the son, neither of whom are named, away from the situation, apologizing. Just saying, I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. For what? For how the world is? For not being able to protect him from the thing he has seen, from the darkness he has experienced? It's such a tragic idea that the father is apologizing for this fucking horrible thing that's being done, not by him. But the trust the 2 characters have in each other, the son helpless and sort of dependent on the father, is heartbreaking, because it's such a terrifying and cruel world. And yet, together, the love that they share is this powerful thing. It's a light that they carry with them, and that needs to be carried with them even as things befall them and they experience this world. It's a very dark book, but it's only in complete darkness that a small light can be fully seen, and it's all about hope and not giving up and carrying that fire. And that's why I think it's one of the most optimistic books ever written, because it's one that acknowledges the darkness and how terrifying it is, and that just being all the evidence you need as to the importance of light, no matter how small. Well, those are our top 10 favourite novels. Please go out and have a read of those.
Yeah.
Some great
stuff.
And then
next week,
there.
Come back and tell us all about them.
Please do. Come tell us. I think that pretty much sums up literature forever. We'll never have to come back to that.
Yeah, thank fuck for that.
No one ever need write about literature again.
No.
Pauls have sorted it.
We did it.
Where can people find out about The One Good Thing?
You can find out on Facebook, Twitter, Gmail, ogtpod@gmail.com. You can listen to us on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean. And if you bend all the way around so that your ear is cupping your own butt, you'll be able to hear the sounds of the pools squeaking out in perpetuity. In perpetuity. Ha.
With their parpy opinions.
Yeah. Fantastic. What a good end to the literature episode.
Oh, a couple of writer boys.
Yeah.
Hoping to make a living off of this at some point, aren't we? In our own little ways. Brilliant.
We'll see how it goes.
Thanks very much for bearing with us through the 3 slightly abstract, different media episodes. We may well return with episodes on things such as television, graphic novels, and, what was it called? Scrimshaw. What's your favourite one? How hard is it to narrow it down? We'll find out. Anyway, for the next few, though, we're going to go back to bad movies and finding good things about them.
Yeah.
It's what you don't pay for. It's what you're going to get. I'm Paul Salt.
I'm Paul Goodman.
And remember, the one good thing about literature is that there is a whole beautiful, extraordinary world of books that aren't 50 Shades of Grey out there just waiting for you.